Go ahead.
Thank you. So our next committee this morning is the Climate Action Committee, which is chaired by Councilmember Vargas. So I turn it over to Councilmember Vargas.
Good morning, everyone. So we have one item in front of us today, and on the committee who's joining me is Councilmember Hamel and Councilmember Lillquist. Our first item is the progress report on the 2021 implementation plan for our climate action plan. And I believe we're going to be starting with Assistant Public Works Director Renee LaCroix.
Good morning, Council. Renee LaCroix, Public Works. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. As you know, we have a climate implementation plan for 2021 that directs staff efforts to address the climate crisis that is facing us all. Seth Fidania will be doing the presentation and will be going through the 6 different areas within our climate action plan, including renewable energy, energy efficiency, transportation, green building, waste reduction, and land use, and talking about the things in the implementation plan that staff are working on and the progress that we are making. And with that, I'll turn it over to Seth.
Thanks, Renee. Can everyone hear me and see my slides? Great. Well, Council, thanks for your time today. And as Renee said, I'm here to provide an update on the progress with the Climate Action Plan implementation plan for 2021. I'll provide some background on how we've gotten to this point, a status report on the implementation plan, and some final thoughts on where we're at as a city. Just want to say also, thanks for the opportunity here, everybody. It's been a challenging and rewarding job here, 15 months in. I work with a really great team in natural resources, and I'm honored to be working on this topic that's of such great importance to you all in the city of Bellingham. So with that, we'll start in here. In January of 2020, staff started with a charge from council to find the best ways to advance the city's climate goals. We began with 145 items from the Climate Action Plan and the Climate Task Force report. And in June, we presented you with the 10 most effective items on this list and produced triple bottom line analyses for each item that we brought back to you in September, November. Also November, we asked you to amend the 2018 Climate Action Plan with these 10 items, and then moved on to assess what items from the CAP we could take on in 2021 through an implementation plan. You can see that through the screenshot here. And you approved that plan on February 8th of this year. So we're here nearly 4.5 months later, providing an update on what we've done in that time. I want to step back a little bit and look at the broader context in which we are going about implementation of our climate work starting globally. In April of this year, NOAA released information showing that during 2020, CO2 continued to rise despite the pandemic. Carbon dioxide levels are now higher than any time in the past 3.6 million years. And during that time, average temperature was 7 degrees higher than in pre-industrial times. Forest occupied much of the Arctic, the areas that are now tundra, and sea level was 80 feet higher than it is today. The recession that was caused by the pandemic was estimated to reduce carbon emissions by about 7% during 2020. And without that economic turn down in 2020, the increase in that year would have been the highest on record. So we continue to put too much carbon pollution into the air globally. On a national level, Biden's first annual budget request includes $14 billion in new annual spending to address climate, including promises to spend 40% of that in communities that are disproportionately impacted by climate change. The request also proposes $800 billion to be invested across the next decade in clean energy technologies in order to make the national goal of 50% emission reductions by 2030. On a state level, there were several climate-related bills that passed during this legislative session, including goals that will hold companies accountable for reducing fluorinated gas emissions. These are very potent greenhouse gases, reducing the carbon intensity of transportation fuels in Washington by 20%, setting a goal for all new vehicle sales in Washington to be electric by 2030, and creating Washington's first cap and trade legislation. One landmark piece of legislation was the HEAL Act, which will bring Washington state policies in line with justice principles so that we can make sure that those who are most affected by pollution and environmental degradation are protected. And these are all in line with the governor's goal to reduce carbon pollution by 50% over the next 9 years. In terms of Bellingham goals, we set a baseline in 2000. As you know, our last greenhouse gas inventory in 2015 showed a 6% drop from our baseline in 2000. Our next goals include a 28% drop in 2020, and we're working on a greenhouse gas inventory for 2019 or 2020 right now, a 40% drop by 2030, and an 85% drop by 2050. So there's a lot of work going on in the U.S. right now, and there's really great interplay between these different spheres of activity, local, state, and national. And it's not just from the federal level on down. It's my opinion and that of others that leadership from U.S. cities has emboldened the state and federal government to take action on this important topic. National statistics show that it's a really good time to be working on these issues. This is info from the Yale Program for Climate Change Communication that shows that over half of Americans describe themselves as alarmed or concerned about climate change, while doubtful and dismissive Americans are under a quarter. Nationally, Latinx and Black Americans are more likely to be in the alarmed or concerned categories than whites, and are also more likely to join a campaign to convince elected officials to reduce global warming. Climate change is more likely to be felt disproportionately by those who are already suffering socioeconomic inequalities. In the States, we know that people of color are found to be particularly more vulnerable to heat waves, extreme weather events, environmental degradation, and the sort of market dislocations that come from these other outcomes of climate change. So move on to the implementation plan itself. I'm going to cover things that we're working on actively within the implementation plan, not everything that city staff is engaged in. In the area of renewable energy, we're pursuing low carbon electricity for the Bellingham community in partnership with Puget Sound Energy. This is one action that could drop our emissions by a third if everyone in the city was enrolled. PSC will issue a request for information to potential renewable energy developers later this month, and hopes to be complete with evaluations by the end of 2021. There are other steps in this process, and they're all known, but their completion date is not. And just a note here, the city's pursuit of this item with PSC goes back to at least early 2019. Given that we're now 2.5 years into this process, we think it's prudent to pursue other avenues for low carbon power simultaneously. And that said, we're now in conversations with the Whatcom PUD to see if they may be able to supply a portion of our renewable energy needs. And we hope to have more info on this for you at our next climate update. On a much more minor level, we'll be hosting a new community solar array, also in partnership with PSC, which will produce enough electricity for about 50 average homes in Bellingham. And while that power production is really small, it does increase availability and access to solar for folks who can't put panels on their apartment or their home. And we're estimating completion of this project in fall 2022. On the waterfront, through conversations with the city and the port has decided to go with a biomass boiler versus a natural gas-fired boiler for phase one of the district energy system at the waterfront. This will allow for a 60% projected reduction in carbon emissions from the power plant. And the utility provider down there, Corix, is sensitive to the common questions that come along with a development like this. Where does the wood come from? What's the embodied carbon of the total life cycle chain of getting this wood to the state where we burn it? And what are the local air quality impacts? And the port and Corix will be reaching out to the community regarding this topic. In the world of energy efficiency, we're looking at programs that will help Bellingham's existing building stock reduce their carbon emissions through efficiency incentives and requirement. And one technology that's key to this process are hot water heat pumps that use electricity as fuel. And we're currently working with Sustainable Connections, the Opportunity Council, and PSC to get the price of these heat as competitive as we can with natural gas heat pumps. And we'll be initiating a community hot water heat pump campaign starting in September during Climate Week. We hope to have a focus on folks in the low income category and those who may be experiencing indoor air quality issues from natural gas combustion internal to the home. In terms of the city itself, municipal operations, Public Works is reviewing a comprehensive facilities study in order to assess which buildings and building components we should look at first for energy and carbon emissions reduction. And we're updating our portfolio manager energy conservation software with current utility data to make the most of our conservation opportunities. Finally, at Post Point, everyone here knows that Post Point is one of our largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions, and we'll be moving away from incineration of those biosolids there. And Public Works staff will provide an update to you in July on this item. In concern to transportation, we continue to focus on implementing EV charging across the community with a $1.5 million grant from the Department of Commerce, matched with $500K from the Voter Approved Transportation Fund. This project will add 90 new level 2 and level 3 chargers across town. Internal to municipal operations, Public Works is continuing to follow internal policy and is looking at electric options for really every piece of equipment that comes up for replacement. And we see that this activity will affect not only our purchasing, but also staffing and operations of the entire fleet group. And finally, in this area, carbon emissions are factoring into the city's return to work policy, which is in development right now. Fewer employee auto trips means less carbon and conservation of employee resources. In the area of green building, the future is electric. We all know that. And we're conducting research and conversations with stakeholders in pursuit of an all-electric ordinance for new commercial and multifamily buildings. We've had the fortune of making use of good work being done in Seattle and King County. Seattle adopted an energy code in February that mandates that all commercial and large multifamily buildings are built all electric, incorporate a number of other items such as envelope improvements, and be built to handle solar panels in the future. We came to you in April with a work session on this topic and continue to have conversations with the BIA and others regarding incremental costs associated with these potential code changes. One barrier to this ordinance right now is a temporary staffing gap in planning and community development. There's hiring for two positions there, and those two positions have been moved to the top of the queue, and we hope to be making more progress on this item soon. Last item here is property assessed clean energy financing. We've been working with the county on this item, and it's looking like that item will be introduced at County Council here soon. And we hope to have a clean energy financing program for commercial entities in Whatcom County, including Bellingham, hopefully by the end of the year. In terms of land use, we'll be continuing to push for high density development broadly. Director Sepler talked about this earlier, and specifically in residential multifamily zones. The residential multi-project makes advancements both broadly and specifically in these multifamily zones by ensuring that our planned densities are achieved and even more housing options are provided in our residential multi-zoned areas. Council will be holding public hearing and conduct work sessions in the summer and early fall on this topic. And finally, here in the area of waste, we didn't really have any waste-related items in the implementation plan for 2021, but there has been consideration of moving the city from a multi-bin recycling system we call dual stream to a one recycling bin system that's the single stream, as was mentioned by Director Johnston earlier. We've been looking to assess the relative carbon impact of each of these options, and there's not a ton of information out there, but the initial study shows that there could be as much as a 1/3 drop in carbon emissions due to the increased recycling with single stream. But that info is a little older and doesn't take into account current international waste policy developments such as the China Sword policy. Last area is this kind of catch-all other category. That includes the Clean Energy Fund, and we are still pursuing creation of a Clean Energy Fund to allow for implementation of the many pieces of this work plan on 2021 and 2022 and the CAP in general. 2021 was a little too soon for public vote, so we're aiming for 2022 at this time. That's the update on the first 6 months of the implementation plan for 2021. Moving forward, we're already starting to think about the creation of an implementation plan for next year. We'll begin outreach in the third quarter of 2021 with a focus on equity and public input. We really want to get some public input on this new implementation plan. That won't be the sole factor in determining what we do next year, but we'd like to understand community and individual priorities, group and individual priorities here in Bellingham. And then we look to secure approval from you, council, in fourth quarter of this year. Just a few final thoughts on strengths and opportunities and threats as we move forward with this work, as well as a little on our position as a community in a group of communities trying to make headway on this important topic. In terms of strength, we all know that there's strong community interest here in Bellingham on this topic, including from our elected officials. There's lots of activity on the local, regional, national, and global level. Other than a global pandemic, there's no better time to be making progress on this key issue here in Bellingham. On the opportunity end of things, I mentioned the $14 billion in new spending proposed by the president for the next fiscal cycle regarding climate items. There's also this request for $800 billion to go to be coming in over the next decade. If this level of funding takes place, we will need to be staffed appropriately to make use of these funds and prepare ourselves to do the best work we can with those funds once they come our way. On a threat level, we know that no matter what we do, either locally or globally, we'll be facing a changing world due to the carbon that's already in the atmosphere. There are some unanswered questions about what level of investment into adaptation to the changing climate is necessary to keep up with this change. We hope to get a better handle on this through the creation of our first climate adaptation report that's currently in the works. With that, I'll end with just some final thoughts on our position in the movement of cities wanting to tackle climate change. The ICLEI, our global climate change group for cities, their stat is that there's 600 climate action plans in the U.S. that have been published. Given that there are about 20,000 incorporated places in the U.S., that's cities, villages, towns, it's about 3% of communities that have a cap. Now, if we pull out the 16,000 localities that are under 10,000, that still leaves us with about 16% of communities that have a climate action plan. And it's important to note that after looking at some of these, that there's a much smaller portion of local governments that have trackable, quantifiable measures in their climate action plans. Most of them list really high-level goals, and fewer have the great implementation strategies that we do. So we really are in the vanguard when it comes to this topic. And that's to say that what we do here in Bellingham is meaningful for the rest of the world. Our successes and our failures can help others to do their part. And it's my perspective that if we are to really embody this leadership role, that our timeline and efforts needs to take into consideration that others will undoubtedly lag behind us in this process, and we should provide them the time that they need to catch up and meet our climate targets globally. That does compress things for us, but it also gives us a chance to take on that leadership role that we see ourselves taking on. That's it for me. Thanks for your time. Look forward to your comments and questions.
Thanks, Seth. Could you take down the presentation? Thank you. Hey, everybody. Renee and Seth, thank you very much for that presentation. It's easy sometimes to think, about what we're not doing, but it was really good to take a look at all the things we are doing. And Bellingham really, really are leaders in regards to energy efficiency and renewables and conservation. And so I'm very proud of you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for our city. I'm going to start with committee for questions. Councilmember Hamill.
I want to go to the renewable category. just briefly here. I want to understand the engagement with Whatcom PUD. The rationale with that is what? Just trying to understand a little bit better.
So we've been in talks with PSC for, as Seth said, for about 2.5 years to see if we can develop a green direct type program for the larger Bellingham community. And PSC has indicated that they are open to that idea and want to pursue it. We haven't, I think that from their perspective, there are substantial challenges to doing so that will require a lot of intensive energy on their part. And from what I understand, they have been busy with other things and their staff has not been able to focus on it in the way that the city of Bellingham would like. And so with that in mind and understanding all the things Seth rattled off during his presentation, we have a crisis ahead of us and we need to be making progress on our energy source. It's the single biggest action we have for the community that can make a dent in our emissions is if we can secure renewable energy. And so we're in the initial stages of talking with the PUD about what a joint study might look like to move the ball forward in a different way.
And Dan, to build on that, if I just might really quickly, as Renee pointed out, PSC is a prime partner of the cities. We appreciate the support and we'll continue to work with them as much as we possibly can. And they will continue to be a leader in this industry in terms of finding opportunities for green power. We also see a need to expand those opportunities for other partnerships that might be a possibility, hence the need to have the conversation with the PUD and others might be presented into the future. So we are tied closely at the hip with PSC. We appreciate their support as they made a presentation to the council a couple of weeks ago. We're exploring opportunities that might present where the PUD, the city, and potentially the PSC could further develop other opportunities. So we're all in this together, and we're pleased with the efforts that all are making, and we're looking for new opportunities to create more efforts as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. I actually have a follow-up on that. I was curious about that as too, is we need more renewables. And I understand that we need to look at everything that we can to make that happen. So I'm curious about two things is, do we have a shovel-ready solar project with the PUD ready to go? Do they have something that we can utilize? That's question number one. I'll stop there.
Short answer is no, we do not have a shovel-ready solar project with the PUD.
It's just a vision conversation. Okay, so there's nothing that we can go, okay, we're being held back because we have a project ready to go. So that's not the case.
No.
Second question is if the PUD or someone else comes up with a solar-ready project for us to get in the grid as soon as possible, is this a procurement that we are going to sell back to PSC? Is that the intention?
I think we're looking for opportunities to find avenues to get to that point. As Renee mentioned, the green direct power is a primary way to get to that point. I would not have more information about other ways to go about that, but I think all things are on the table. The city's already invested into a solar panel array on one of our facilities that we own and operate. It is limited by the rules that we have to follow as to how large that can be, without getting us into the power production in realm. And so as we talk with the PUD, who does have the ability to be in the power production realm, that's a partnership there. If the city does have contracts with other power providers who are on the power production system, we have a turbine that's not used very much on the diversion pipeline, but the city is not a power producer per se, and that presents another element. But
right, or distribution.
The underpinning of this is the desire to look to new alternatives and different ways to think about the problem, and that's kind of the message we're trying to deliver there.
Okay, yeah, renewables is one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves right now. We have to look at every single option. I just don't want to get into the distribution energy.
No, absolutely not. I mean, our conversations with the PUD are about power production, not about distribution.
Wonderful.
Not heading down that pathway.
Okay, that's great. Councilmember Lillquist.
Thank you. I just want to reinforce and support a lot of the previous comments that were just made. I too was going to ask about partnership with the Whatcom PUD. I think the very last in-person meeting, now next to last, maybe it's the last PUD meeting, council meeting we had before COVID, was hearing from the PUD and was discussion about a public power partnership program. I think COVID delayed that work. I wish we did have a shovel-ready project going forward. I am a strong believer that a public power alternative is a great way to create additional new additive renewable energy capacity. And this is in parallel with PSE, right? We are going to need more than one option, and a powerful local project using the PUD. As Pinky says, we're not energy providers and distributors, but certainly we can become foundational partners and can put significant resources behind supporting PSC if they have a program, or supporting a public entity like the PUD. So I'm anything you need from me to support further investigations and study of a partnership with PUD for increased renewable power, I'm there for you. Which goes to, I guess, my remaining question. Seth, you chose to not talk too much about the Clean Energy Fund. This could be a significant way of raising monies that perhaps could be used for something like investing and powering a renewable energy project partnership. This would be a voted revenue measure, I understand, and the current thinking is not this year, maybe next year. Can you expand on that a little bit more, please?
Yeah, this in conversations with Prep for Mayor's climate team and Mayor's climate team, it just felt like 2021 was too soon. There were a number of items that needed to happen, including creation of a draft that both the city and our community partners felt strongly about. This is something that we've heard from a number of different community groups, seeing their interest on, and getting to that point early enough in the process to submit all of the necessary paperwork just wouldn't happen in 2021. We hope that it'll happen in 2022. But we are having conversations now with community groups and others about this topic. And that's our aim, 2022 at this point.
Okay, I do want to keep that conversation going, keep it alive. And one reason why I would look toward the Clean Energy Fund is sort of what you had mentioned, Seth, with regard to President Biden's plan to make sure to set aside significant earmark for affecting communities who are disproportionately affected or disadvantaged when it comes to things like clean energy and the effects of pollution. If we had a local Clean Energy Fund, we could also look to programs that would aid in a more just transition. Basically make sure the costs don't fall unfairly and disproportionately, and that the benefits are borne in an equitable fashion. So that's another reason why I want to make sure that that conversation continues to move ahead. Thank you very much.
One other quick follow-up on that is, yes, the last meeting, right, Michael, that we had was with the PUD. And at the time, there was only support from one commissioner. And I'm curious where the PUD is at right now, and if they are more, as a whole, more open to this idea, because the last time they were not. It was just a minority.
I think we would hesitate to speak for the PUD, to be honest, Ms. Vargas, but I think that we're continuing those conversations, certainly at a staff level, and at some point would be a conversation about if that were to advance forward, what would the mechanism that would take? And so at the appropriate point in time, if that gets ripe, it would be an interlocal agreement between the city and the PUD for some purpose as yet to be defined. But in terms of the conversations between staff with Seth and Renee and myself and others, with the senior staff at the PUD, that those conversations are continuing to progress. So if that's an indication of support of the commissioners with the PUD, that's as far as I'd be.
Great. That's, thank you. Because I was like, where are they? I have a couple other questions, but committee members, we can alternate. If you have other things, just let me know, okay? I have a couple questions, Seth. If we could unpack just a little bit, you talked about for city buildings in regards to building optimization software, and in the update spreadsheets that you gave us, it says continue with the RCM. I don't know the status. Two things. I don't know if this status is our RCM internal or is a contract. Do we have an internal RCM now, or do we have a contractor?
Eric, do you
It's an internal process, but we've chosen not to designate a single individual to be the designated resource conservation manager. We distribute those responsibilities through the facilities division and the finance division of the public works department, so that we're not reliant on one singular position. But those duties are nested within the facilities division's superintendent, manager, and lead within that particular department.
So then I'm guessing the building optimization software upgrade that we're going to do, is that going to allow every facilities person who's managing different buildings to see where their energy efficiency and their optimization is at?
Yes, I believe so. But the facility, different. All of the buildings have a single manager, so they're all under a singular umbrella. So by consolidating all the buildings into a single facilities division, it has the responsibility flows from the staff to the manager, to the superintendent, the assistant director, to myself, and then up through that chain of command. So the upgrade is simply to get that software to its current state, as it's a little older than it has been. We're also really trying hard to focus on making sure that the connections between the accounting staff, the finance staff, and where the bills are paid,
What our bills are
connected within a separate division. So
That's
we have
really
all those pieces
important
together. So this is a good example, I think, of where we need to institutionalize and create the bureaucracy to allow that system to function, and not assign it to one individual, but to make sure it's part of the normal course of business, the things we just do. And that's a struggle, and it does take some time, but we're moving in the right direction from my perspective.
I think that's great, because we really need that connection. So having people who individually manage a building be aware of how much energy their building is using is a huge step forward. And in that, so just a little deeper on that one, in regards to energy efficiency for all of our municipal buildings, and in regards to the checklist of making sure that every single one of our buildings has upgraded lighting and upgraded equipment, and that we're not using things that are draining us. And I'm curious where we are on the status of that, because, energy efficiency is still our number one conservation. So I'm kind of curious on the status of making sure all of our buildings are energy efficient.
We're plugging along. That's always a resource constraint in terms of capital dollars and actual time to actually get the work done. We do have a significant amount of identified capital projects that, if the funding were to be available, that could be done. For example, the boilers in City Hall could be replaced. That's not a cheap thing to do.
Nope.
On the other hand, the staff is making steady progress, and this might seem trite and small, but the light switch in my office is an automatic motion detector light switch, right? And slowly but surely we're going through and picking off both sides of that. So it's coming from both ends. You've got the large scale capital projects. The new building here at Pacific Street is fully electric, as we're doing the designs, conceptual planning for the new administrative building to replace the court. 100% electric on that building. So measures to make sure that the buildings that we're doing are 100% electric and highly efficient. And then retrofits to existing buildings as well. So as we do new projects, making sure that we're retrofitting those facilities with the new appropriate technology, but also the day-to-day, the basic simple things, and making sure that what we have is working correctly.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, so thank you so much. Also excited about electrifying all our gear. I think that's a great way to go on that one. And then just curious, Seth, we were in that ICLEI meeting last week about, what other cities are doing, et cetera. And I was going to look into the ICLEI 150 to see if our city would qualify for that. And I'm curious if that's something that you've thought about, whether you think that would be a benefit, or if we have all the data and information needed to go forward with that.
Yeah, Councilmember Vargas, great question. I have been thinking about that. As I understand, one of the items in this commitment to being part of the ICLEI 150, it's a group of cities that are agreeing to, there's a few things, but one of them is science-based targets. So allowing the global climate data to direct how much we're reducing by when. So incorporating science-based targets into our planning, our climate planning, and then making sure that council and everyone else is okay with that. What we would have to do either before or after that commitment would be to convert from our current goals to science-based target goals. And that's the piece you mentioned, lack of data. That's the piece that we don't really have information on. ICLEI is requiring a 2016 or newer greenhouse gas inventory to basically go through that data and advise us on what that science-based target would be. We're in that process right now of completing a more current, likely 2019, maybe 2020 greenhouse gas inventory. Once that's done, we'll be in a better state. But as they said in that meeting, council can sign on before that time, or you can wait for that data to process, get some information on science-based targets, and then sign on. But it does require an interim 2030 goal, which we already have. And then it also requires a zero carbon goal by 2050. Ours is currently 85% for the community, is 85% from a 2000 baseline. So we would be shrinking that time period in which we are making progress.
And if I could add to that, I fully support it. It's something I'd like to see the city do, is join the ICLEI 150. As I said, we're looking at what that might take. And from a prioritization standpoint, I'd like to see staff make more progress with the implementation plan and focus on that versus spending time joining a group that will help us do what we're already doing, right? Yeah. And so not to diminish their effort at all, because I do support it. I do think it's important. I'd like to see us get there, but given that we have limited staff right now, we do have to prioritize.
I totally get that. I'd rather us do the work and join the club. So I totally get that. Thank you so much. Committee members, any additional questions? No? Again,
if I may.
Yes.
I do have one more question for the council. As Seth mentioned, we are moving forward with developing draft electrification codes for the city. And as he mentioned, we're ahead of a lot of municipalities out there with the work that we've done. Fortunately, City of Seattle and King County are slightly ahead of us in that particular item. And so they have a great roadmap that we can follow. One of the things that I'd like to do and that I recommend is that we use City of Seattle cost estimate data as part of our work in informing the conversation for the code development. And so I just want to bring that up and see what council thought of that, and perhaps get a head nod that that's something that could be supported.
Yeah, I'll just speak and then turn it over to committee. But I say yes, because there's no way that our costs are going to be lower than Seattle's. So I think that they've done some great work and they have way more resources than we do. So I say absolutely. Councilmember Lillquist.
I agree with what you were just saying, Pinky. I think we should start with their cost estimates. If we can think of simple ways we might adjust them, or at least put in kind of like caveats, like thinking that, if anything, it airs on this side or airs on that side. So sort of use their numbers, but be aware that there might be a little bit of difference. And if we could figure out what that difference is, kind of put it into our thinking, but don't redo the exercise.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other direction or anything you need from us? No? Again, thank you so much. I'm very proud of our team and the work that you're doing and the leadership that we're showing. So thank you for everything that you're putting into this and making our city the extraordinary city it is. So thank you. And that was our last item. And with that, end of committee. Do you want me to adjourn, Hannah, or do you want to adjourn?
Either way. Yep. I was just going to say, we're done for the morning. We will reconvene at 1:00 this afternoon with committee of the whole. And until then, we are adjourned. Thank you.